We use our minds every single second of every day. But how often do we actually think about how we're using them? Most of us are just running on default settings. Well, today we're going to take a look under the hood at your brain's hidden operating system. And it all starts with some questions you've probably never even thought to ask. Our world is just full of these weird little puzzles we never stop to consider. Like, for instance, have you ever been on a huge cruise ship and just wondered, where do the 30,000 gallons of waste that ship produces every day, where does it all go? Or how about this one? We all know laughing feels great, right? But how does that simple reaction to a good joke physically actually help your heart? It's a real biological thing. And here's a totally wild one. If you're ever outside in a storm and your hair suddenly stands on end, you need to run for cover immediately. But why? What is the physics behind that absolutely terrifying warning sign? Okay, so these are all fascinating puzzles about the world around us. But what if the most complex, the most important mysteries aren't out there at all, but right here, inside our own skulls? Today, we're decoding our brain's hidden operating system. So let's start with one of the biggest myths of all, our emotions. For centuries, we've been told to separate our heads from our hearts, logic on one side, feelings on the other. But what if our feelings aren't some kind of bug in the system, but are actually the most sophisticated feature we have? See, the old view, even in science, was that emotion is just static. It's interference that keeps us from making perfectly logical choices. But the new view is the total opposite. Emotions aren't interference at all. They are integration. They're like a high-speed algorithm running incredibly complex calculations for us. Okay, let's see this emotional algorithm in action. Just a quick thought experiment. Imagine you lose your wallet, and let's say it's got $200 in it. Ugh, you feel that sinking feeling in your stomach, right? That's a pure, quantifiable loss. But then, just an hour later, your luck completely changes. You look down, and you happen to find a crisp $100 bill just sitting there on the sidewalk. So boom, you've gained $100. On paper, this should be a pretty good thing, right? I mean, logically, your net worth just jumped by $100. You should feel pretty great, shouldn't you? But you don't. That $100 feels kind of like a consolation prize, totally overshadowed by the $200 you lost. If we were just walking calculators, this would make absolutely zero sense. And this is a perfect illustration of what's called disappointment and elation theory. The whole idea is that the value of anything isn't fixed. It's all relative to your expectations. Your brain isn't just adding and subtracting dollars, it's running a kind of emotional calculus. The feeling of disappointment from the loss literally subtracts from the feeling of elation from the gain. How you got there is everything. Now, this hidden logic doesn't just apply to our feelings, it's also running in our thoughts. I think a lot of us worry that we overthink things, but it turns out we might not even be using the right word for what's really happening. So here's the crucial distinction. What we usually call overthinking is actually just repetitive rumination. It's a mental loop that goes around and around and never gets anywhere. Deep thinking, on the other hand, is a completely different process. It's structured, it's analytical, and its whole purpose is to find real clarity. Metacognitive therapy actually gives this a clinical name, cognitive attentional syndrome, or CAS for short. It's basically a specific set of processes that explains why we get stuck. And the important thing is, it's not a character flaw. It's just a feedback loop in the system. And here's how that loop works. It all starts with worry or rumination. That then leads you to constantly be on high alert, monitoring for threats, more negative thoughts. And that, in turn, triggers these coping behaviors that actually backfire, like trying to suppress the thought, which of course only makes it stronger and then fuels more worry. It's a self-perpetuating cycle. So we've seen how our internal OS processes emotions and thoughts, but what about how it takes in new information from the outside world? Well, that brings us to another process we totally take for granted: reading. This is such a fundamental shift in how to think about it. Most of us chase speed. We want to see the words on the page faster, but that's just the delivery system. The real act of reading, the part that actually matters, is comprehension. You really haven't read a single thing until you've understood it. A good way to think about this is like a tale of two brains. The left brain is a serial processor. It decodes words one by one in a straight line, kind of like a worker on an assembly line. But the right brain, it's a parallel processor. It doesn't see individual words. It sees patterns, images, and whole concepts all at once.
So true reading speed doesn't come from making the left brain work faster. It comes from engaging the right brain to see the big picture.
So, what does this all mean? How do we take this understanding of our brain's hidden operating system and actually use it to navigate a world that feels like it's constantly demanding speed over depth?
Well, the solution isn't to become shallower, it's to become more strategic. You can choose your arenas, the places where depth is actually valued. You can practice what's called communication compression, getting really good at summarizing complex thoughts clearly. It's about balancing that reflection with action. And this one is crucial, regulating your information intake so you don't trigger those rumination loops we just talked about. And finally, you avoid intellectual isolation by finding other people who also value a deep discussion.
And this is really the ultimate takeaway. If you sometimes feel a little out of sync with the world today, it doesn't mean you're broken. It might just mean your cognitive style isn't optimized for spectacle and sound bites. But in an age that rewards immediacy, things like clarity and depth, they become these indispensable long-term advantages. So I'll leave you with this. If your emotions, your thoughts, your gut feelings, if all of that is the output of a sophisticated internal calculus, an algorithm designed to help you navigate the world, what equation is your brain trying to solve for you, right at this very moment?